Hey folks, welcome back. We're going to go travel back down the whole Frsky, ACCST 2.0, XM Plus, LMNOP saga that we've got going on here. Most things that are coming with a Frsky XM receiver, and even the XM receivers themselves, bare, are coming with ACCST 2.0 firmware on them. Now, I made a video a couple weeks ago on how you can decide to go forward. Either you can downgrade the XM Plus, or you can upgrade your equipment. Probably a good idea to update your equipment. But previously, the only radios that were able to bind with ACCST 2.0 were the genuine Frsky radios, but not anymore. The devs for the multi-protocol module project, they have created a new protocol called Frsky X2 that is designed to bind to the ACCST 2.0 firmwares, like what would be in the RXSRs, XM Plus. And well, basically, those are the only two relevant receivers as far as non-access ones, but we're going down a weird road there. But anyways, I'm going to take you through the process of getting this radio up and ready to bind to a newer XM Plus with the ACCST 2.0 firmware. And the reason why I chose this radio is because this is actually a very, very good starter radio. It doesn't have the 4-in-1 module, but it does have the CC2500 module, which can do Frsky, FlySky, and a whole slew of other protocols. I think the big one it won't do is Spectrum, but whatever. It's a very inexpensive radio. Great radio grips for them. If you're looking for a set, tweetfv.com, head to Etsy and pick yourself up a set, or go to Race Day Quads. So I chose this radio because this radio is new to me and it needs to be updated. So let's go ahead and get this process started. So the first things you're going to need to do is you need to download a couple pieces of software. First off, you need to download OpenTX Companion. So go to open-tx.org, and on the firmware page, scroll down here, and whatever the newest one is under news, go ahead and click on that one. So we have version 2.3.11, and we're going to come down here, and I'm on Windows. This is going to be a Windows tutorial. So we're going to click on the Windows installer. Go ahead and get that downloading. The next thing you're going to need, since we haven't actually flashed firmware to this radio, is we're going to need to download the Impulse RC driver fixer, because this radio needs to be put into DFU mode. I'm not going to go into what DFU mode is, but basically it's what's going to allow OpenTX to write the firmware to the bootloader of this radio. It's very important that we have updated the operating system and the bootloader at the same time. And the way we do it is with the driver fixer. Now, this is a one-time thing. Once we have this radio go into DFU mode once, it'll do it every time, and we don't have to worry about this driver fixer. So we're going to go to Impulse RC, and we're going to download the driver fixer. I will put links to all these web pages down in the doobly-doo here. So we're going to download the Impulse RC driver fixer. Now, there are a lot of issues with the Impulse RC driver fixer and Windows security. A lot of people won't actually be able to download it. Windows recognizes it as a virus. I haven't seen any effects, and I don't think it actually is a virus. So you may need to lower, I know this sounds really shady, you may need to lower the security settings on your internet browser to download it. To run it, that's a whole other story. We'll talk about it in a little bit here. And the last thing you're going to need to download is the firmware for the internal RF module, the CC2500 transmitter module. So we're going to go to this page here, and you know what, I'll put a convenient link which will have this all set up for you, but you can go to this page. Again, I'll put a link in the video description. We're going to select Radiomaster TX12, and by the way, if you're doing this with a Radiomaster TX16, a Jumper T16, whatever, this is all the exact same process, just different names and numbers. But we're just going to pick the newest stable releases on everything. So Radiomaster TX12, this is a CC2500 module. Firmware version as of this video is 1.3.2.77. Yeah, could have made that shorter. It's STM32, and I always do channel order TAER because I jump between a bunch of different radios. I've started off with TAER, and that's just what I use. If you're new into this hobby, I go AETR because that seems to be the Betaflight default, and it's just one less thing you don't have to mess with when you're updating or setting up Betaflight. And we're going to come down here and we're going to download the bin file, and we're also going to download the lewiscripts.zip. All right, so we have those downloading. going to take the radio, make sure we got batteries in it, and we're going to plug it in, make sure it's still powered off. Now that it's plugged in, it'll go ahead and charge the batteries. We'll just let it sit for a little bit. We need to install OpenTX Companion. So go ahead and run the installer for OpenTX Companion. Just I agree and just click through everything, blah, blah, blah. It's a pretty quick process. And hit finish. So we're gonna get a window that looks like this. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna wanna do before we start this update process is you're gonna want to back up your models and settings from your radio. I don't usually do this because I've never lost anything, but there's always that chance that you will. So first thing we're gonna do, power the radio on, plug it in, wait for Windows to recognize it. If this is your first time plugging it in, it's gonna have to load some drivers and things like that. But you'll see in your notification bar when that's done. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over to OpenTX Companion and we're going to hit this button here, just hover over it. It should say backup radio to file. So we're gonna hit that and you're gonna find a safe place that you can remember where you're saving this. So this is gonna be TX12 stock backup, something you can remember. And we're gonna hit save. And what it's gonna do is gonna read all the settings and the models off the radio and it's going to dump that to a file for safekeeping. So if we bork this whole thing up, we can come back. By the way, these radios are great. You really can't brick them with software. They're almost always recoverable, at least in every situation I've ever found. So now we have our models backed up. Go back over to the radio, unplug it, and turn it off. Now with the radio still turned off, go ahead and plug it back in. Now we're going to leave the radio turned off and we have to deal with the DFU mode. So come back to our files that we downloaded and go ahead and run the Impulse RC driver fixer. You may end up with an error like Windows cannot access something something. There may be an issue with it, and what this is a Windows Defender thinking this is a virus and blocking it. So here's how we're going to deal with that. So hit the start button, type in Defender. You're going to get this little window that pops up, and we're going to click on Virus, Threat, and Protection. And we're going to see we have a current threat. This is the PU Windows 32 install core. If you want to make sure this is the right one, you can actually click on it and go to See Details. And we're going to see that it is Impulse RC driver fixer that is what we're talking about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say allow on device. If you are not comfortable with this, I'm sorry. I don't know of any other way around the DFU mode thing than this. So change that to allow on this device and hit start actions. All right, now we should be able to run the Impulse RC driver fixer. It's going to say searching for flight controller. It's not necessarily looking for a flight controller. It's looking for something that needs to go in DFU mode, which is the radio. It's going to install the DFU driver. And this is the same thing for if you're trying to flash firmware to a flight controller, any other radio, things like that, and you can't get in DFU mode. This is the easiest way to do it. Some flight controllers have a very easily accessible boot button. That'll do it too. I don't know where the boot button is on this. I'm sure it's in the radio somewhere, but we're gonna go through this process here. We should get a driver's success. Something about Chrome was running. Well, don't worry about that. Hit OK. And we can go back to OpenTX Companion. Click the little gear icon. And we're going to want to make sure radio type, we have the correct one selected. If you're not doing a TX12, make sure this is right. You can flash the wrong firmware to your radio and it won't start again. Don't worry, it doesn't brick it. Yeah, I haven't seen one brick yet because of this. So we're going to make sure we select Radiomaster TX12. I don't fly collective pitch heli, so I click no heli. Make sure you click Lua. And I like the SQT5 font on these black and white radios. That's just me. And if for some reason you're on Frsky R9 and you use the Flex firmware, make sure you click the Flex button here. And channel order, you just leave all this stuff alone. It's fine. Go ahead and click OK. Now that we have that set, go ahead and click the download button. We're going to check for updates. And we have an update. Go ahead and say yes and download that to a place that you'll remember where it's at. And for this whole process, we're gonna need an SD card. That's how we're gonna transfer the firmware for the internal module to the radio, is through an SD card. So gotta have an SD card. Just get a cheapo 8 gig. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. But also if we're gonna continue to run an SD card on this, we want the sounds, we want the Lewis scripts, we want all the fun stuff that comes with OpenTX. We're gonna have to do is click SD card contents download and just pick whatever the newest one is and download away. All right, while that's downloading in the background, nothing else we have to do. We can hit OK. That closes. Come back over to the left side and hover over the gear icon with the radio and the red down button. That's going to be right firmware. Click on that guy. Make sure we hit check hardware compatibility. It should automatically populate where that firmware was that we downloaded. If not, make sure this looks right. We got the path. And go ahead and hit right to radio. Make sure your radio is still off and you haven't disconnected it after doing the driver fixer. Hit right to radio. I always do show details because I like to see what's going on. There's 2 loads. The first one's going to go real quick and the next one's going to take a bit longer. The second set is loading the bootloader. So we wait. All right, now that that's done, we can hit close, and we're done with OpenTX Companion, unless for some reason we lost our models. If we did lose our models, turn the radio on, plug it in, hit this one that says write backup to radio, pick that backup file that we made earlier, and that'll dump everything back onto the radio. So we can close OpenTX Companion now, and we can go back over to the radio, disconnect it, and power it on.
Welcome to OpenTX. Throttle warning.
All right, first thing we need to do is make sure we actually update the firmware. So hold the system button or however you get into the system menus. And this whole layout may have changed depending on how old the firmware was. So I'm just gonna go back one. And we're gonna see version. We're gonna see we have version 2.3.11. That's good. I'm gonna turn the radio off. Next, we wanna check to make sure we actually updated the bootloader. On most radios, it's hold the 2 trim switches inward and tap the power button. Don't hold it, just tap. And we're gonna see we have OpenTX 2.3.11 as the bootloader. The only radio I think that's different than this is the Frsky X-Lite. You're just basically gonna mash down all 4 directions on that little D-pad and hit the power button. All right, turn the radio off. And let's go ahead and turn it back on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Next, we need to get the SD card contents onto the radio. You can do this one of 2 ways. One, you can do it through the pass-through on the radio, which is a little slower, or you can pull the SD card out and stick it in the SD card reader. Either way, doesn't matter. So if you're gonna do it through the radio, plug your cable in, and you should see a menu come up that says USB joystick or USB storage. We're gonna do USB storage. Okay, so I'm gonna choose to do this through the SD card through the radio connected to the computer. It's a little slower, but this will work just fine. Shortcut, hit Windows E. This will bring up Windows Explorer. Go ahead and find your USB drive on your radio. It should be empty. If not, you can go ahead and clear it out. But if you're updating OpenTX, there's a faster way to do this. I'll show you the basic way right now. The SD card contents that you downloaded earlier, go ahead and extract those to your computer. Go into those files that were extracted, take all of them and dump them onto the SD card. It's a very slow process, so go get yourself a cup of coffee. It's going to be a minute. Now, if you already have the SD card contents on your radio and you're just trying to update things, here's what I do. Take everything except for the sounds and the scripts folder and the firmware folder and copy them over. The sounds take up a ton of space. Scripts, I usually have custom scripts in there, things that are extra that I don't want to write over. And then as far as firmware, that's where I keep all my various firmware files. So I don't want to overwrite those with a blank directory. And there's never anything new inside of those, or it doesn't seem like it anyways. But basically leaving off the sounds makes this go by way faster. The sounds take forever. And you can even remove languages that you don't use, because I think there's like 3 or 4 different languages in there. I speak English, so we'll leave English in there and omit the rest. But play the waiting game. Oh, wow, that took forever. Okay, now that that's done, that multi-Lua scripts file we downloaded, make sure that's extracted. Take the scripts and the tools. We're going to go to scripts and tools on the SD card, and we're just going to write over all that stuff. All right. One last thing. We're going to go into that firmware folder on the SD card, and that multi-STM CC2500 file, we're going to write that to the SD card. Now, this radio is not going to be able to read this file because it's too long, too many characters, so I'm just going to take it and chop it down to basically just the firmware version. And that's it. We can go ahead and close out of the stuff, head back over to the radio. All right, so back at the radio, go ahead and disconnect it. And hold down your system key, and we're going to page over to page 2, and we're going to go down to firmware. And there is that bin file. That is the internal RF modules firmware. Hold down on the wheel, and we're going to select Flash Internal Multi. And that's it. Your radio is completely updated now. So, what was the point of all this? That's right, to bind to ACCST 2.0 firmware on the XM Plus or whatever receiver you're working with. So, we're going to hold down the model, and we're going to go down to 5. I'm just going to make a new model. Create model, multi, and I'm just going to page through all this stuff because it doesn't really matter right now. You can set that all up later. And we're going to go page over. So this is our model setup. I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and we're going to go to internal RF. Go to internal RF. Where it's off, we're going to change that to multi. For type, we're going to scroll over to Frsky X would be for the older ACCST pre-2.0 firmware. Frsky X2 is for the new 2.0 and newer firmware. Click that. This is what firmware version is on the internal RF module. If you ever want to check to see if you have older firmware or what you have on there, this is how you find out. And just like binding any other receiver from Frsky, you're going to hold the button down on the receiver. I'm going to change this to receiver 1 just because I have reasons. You don't need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hold the bind button down on the receiver while I power it. Make sure you feel that little tactile bump. Hold that down and plug it in. You should end up with a green and a red LED. They should be solid. All right, so now we're going to go down to bind, and we're going to bind channel 1 through 8 telemetry on, and you should see your receiver's reacting. If it doesn't react, then you probably don't have ACCST 2.0 firmware, or you didn't get it into bind mode, one or the other. But the receiver should react. This will automatically stop. What you can do is now power cycle the receiver. And something I have noticed with the multi-protocol modules is we're getting the flashing red failsafe light. kind of sporadic and intermittently. These radios don't like being close to the receivers. So if I walk the receiver about 3 feet away, you can see, I know it's hard to see, there we go. We have our green bound and communicating LED. But if I bring the radio close, grab it here, getting close, and see, now we're getting fail safe. So don't get confused. You want to make sure you get the radio away from the receiver, and you should be fine. And that's it. All right, folks, thanks for watching. I know this is a lot of headache to just go ahead and bind to something, but this is what you have to do. Once you do it once, it's easier the second time, and once you have everything working, you can just not change anything. The other option was to downgrade the firmware on the receiver. I don't like to look backwards. Let's keep going forward. Use the new stuff. There are issues with the older ACCST1 firmware. ACCST 2.0 does fix a few bugs and issues with those receivers. So yeah, I know it's a lot to get this going, but that's it. It's a very simple process, especially once you do it once. Now we don't have to deal with that DFU driver stuff anymore. It should just flash on its own. If anything I did here helps you out, saved you money, saved you time, consider going to tweetfb.com. There's a lot of different ways you can support me. Passively, you can click those affiliate links. Whatever you buy, after you click that link, I get a small commission. It's an easy way for you to support me. Or if you want to do a more direct way, there's PayPal. And the best way is obviously Patreon. There's some benefits over there. Go ahead and check it out. All right, folks, thanks for watching this. If you have any questions about this or comments, let me know. If you need any more additional help, definitely head over to my Discord, find it at tweetfb.com. That's where I help out the vast majority of you guys as far as this Frsky and Radiomaster. Like, I've been answering a lot of Radiomaster questions lately as opposed to Frsky. We'll get you sorted out. And as always, stay positive, folks. See you next time.